Hi everyone, my name is Kirsten Kraus. I'm Research Advisor for WIS Academy and Facilitator of the Research Capacity Building Workshops. Welcome to the WIS Academy YouTube channel where we empower researchers with tools to excel in their research. In today's video I'm going to look at what is typically required in the final chapter of a thesis, so stay tuned. The final chapter of the thesis is really like, where all the loose ends of your argument, all the pieces of your argument come together, are tied together. So it's a very important chapter. And although it's the last chapter of your thesis, it's often one of the first that an examiner would read. I personally, when I assess a thesis, I look at the title, I look at the abstract, and then I go straight for the table of contents, because the table of contents gives me an overview of the thesis. I then also go and look at the methodology. Then I'll read the first chapter and then the last chapter, and then only will I go into the details. And so one of the things I'm looking for is, alignment between the first chapter, what you say you do, and then actually in the final chapter, whether you've been able to do that. So my suggestion in terms of what to put in a final chapter would be, firstly, you start that chapter with a summary of your thesis argument. Now, that could almost look like the last section of the first chapter where you've got a reading roadmap, but in this case, you need to basically indicate two parts, I would say two things there. The first is what each chapter did and how they connect with each other, and then you need to summarize your thesis argument. That would be the first section. The second section is what you then do there is you revisit your research questions or your study objectives. And so you clearly say, research question 1, this is what the question was about, and this is how the question was answered. If you are able, and the fact that you can articulate in a very short paragraph how a research question was answered is a good indication that you have mastered the thesis argument. So that's a very important thing to do. So in that second section, you would say, question 1, here's the answer summarized. Question 2, here's the answer summarized, etc. Then I would suggest that you articulate your key contributions. Now, when you articulate your key contributions, think theoretical contributions, think methodological contributions, and think practical contributions. Revisit the limitations of prior research. So it can be like you revisit your research problem briefly and then indicate your better explanation. Because remember, one of the most important things about a thesis is that you need to be able to infer to a better explanation. Then in the fourth section, I would say, indicate to whom this research should be of value. So there you can connect to, let's say, your theory or methodological or practical contribution, but then you would say, if I'm a researcher, this is why this thesis would be useful or why the findings would be important. If you're a practitioner, this would be why the findings would be important. So you need to reflect and write something about that. Then never underestimate the value of giving guidance to policymakers. Some sorts of studies don't require that, but some actually do. So now think about what policymakers can learn from your thesis. And sometimes it's not just policymakers, it's people implementing policy. So think around those as well. The section 5, I would say, indicate how you believe this thesis should be assessed. So build in self-assessment criteria for your thesis. So if you've got a thesis, let's say on interpretivism, then use guidance on how interpretivist research should be assessed. If you use case study research and education, then use guidance for how case study research should be assessed. But then strengthen the assessment criteria, bring your own assessment criteria in particularized for your study, and then say that, because in that section you actually have an opportunity to guide your examiner through the process of assessing your thesis. And then in the final section, I would say, discuss limitations and recommendations for further work. That is where you say what you could not do, what parts of the problem you could not address, what aspects of the research questions you could not address, and then give cues or ideas to your readers as to what topics and problems or ideas they can take further in their own research. I've given like these 6 sections, but it doesn't mean it has to be in that order. And it doesn't mean you can't merge some of those. So that's basically the 6. Happy final chapter writing.